Hey guys, welcome back to Sockets and Sideburns. So today we have part 3 of the rocker cover saga, valve clearance adjustment. Now I can't find any specific figure for when you should be doing this procedure. I've found figures ranging from 60,000 miles up to 100,000 miles. Mostly it's just said to do it if valve noise becomes apparent. Now this Clio has covered over 130,000 miles. I don't really think it needs doing on this engine, but this video has been requested a lot in the comments and it can't hurt to check while I've got the rocker cover off. So to do this job, you'll obviously need to remove the rocker cover first, which I've already made a video for, and I'll put a card up on the screen for it right now. This adjustment procedure will work for all of the Clio 2 and Clio 3s fitted with the 1.2 litre 16 valve engines, all the D4F engines. It's just the valve clearances that vary between these. And there are a lot of variants that have been fitted to these vehicles over the years. More on that later. Now, if you're unsure which engine is fitted to your car, then please take a look at my engine code stamp video, which again I'll put a card up for on the screen right now. Now, this Clio behind us that we'll be doing this on today is the 2005 Clio 2 with the 1.2 16 valve D4F 722 engine in. Okay, couple of things before we start. Firstly, it's critical that this is done with the engine cold. And as I just mentioned, the 1.2 D4F engine has been revised quite a few times and has crossed over a few Clio models. In fact, it's actually still in use today. Some of the changes to the engine involved the intake, head and valves, so there are a few different valve clearance settings for this engine. Now I'll put all these up on the screen now, but there's going to be more popping up as I explain further. Unfortunately, the engine mounted in this car, the D4F 722, sort of falls between the Clio 2 and 3s. As such, there's a bit of conflicting information regarding the valve clearance settings. Literally all the major sources say different things. You've got the Haynes manual saying one thing, Autodata saying something, and Renault's manual, which I found online, saying something totally different to all that. Now you would think, looking at what we have here, well, it's a Clio 2. So go with the Clio 2 settings, right? Well, no. These Clio 2 settings are for the D4F 712 engine, and the 722 100% has a different head to the 712, evidenced by the lack of a bearing cap at the flywheel end as well as the cam belt end, which the 712s all have. Now, to make matters worse, I found the actual Renault Clio 2 and Clio 3 manuals, which under valve clearances just refers to a technical note, 6004A, 6004A, which gives valve clearances different to any other manual and are meant to be for all the D4F variants, the 702, 06, 08, 12, 14, 16, 22, 28, 30 and 40, all of which are listed at the top of the page where it says about the clearances. So it's at this point that I'm getting a little bit frustrated. So after literally spending days trying to find some solid specs on the 722 when it's mounted into the Clio 2, I just gave up and decided to go to a Renault dealership and ask. I figured the very worst they could do was just laugh in my face and say we don't give out those specs, which to be honest is what I was pretty sure that they were actually going to do. However, I was actually pleasantly surprised. The guy at the parts counter got me the procedure and specs printed off. I'm not going to name names or locations, but if he ever sees this, you know who you are, mate. Thank you. He even wrote out all the Renault part numbers that I used in the previous video for all the gaskets that would be replaced during this job. So as a result, now I have the info that a Renault tech would get to do this. Basically, this is exactly how it would be done if I took it to that Renault dealership. The info I got from the Renault dealer is exactly the same info as is listed for the Clio 3s, and does specifically mention the D4F 722. You'll also note that on the Clio 3s there is reference to 2 different camshafts possibly being fitted. Now, I'm not sure when these were introduced, but the procedure I got from the Renault dealership said to check for this. So I will be, and I suggest you do the same if you have a D4F 722, and obviously any Clio 3s as well. I'll show you where to look for this groove in just a second. So I'm going to be using the Clio 3 values, which are the same as what I got from the dealership. However, if you have any of the other Clios which fall perfectly into any of the other specs, then obviously use those values. But if you have a 722 in a Clio 2, you'll have to use this information to make a decision the same as I have on which valve clearances you're going to use. Now there are two ways to do this on the D4F engine: crankshaft position and exhaust valve open method. I'm going to do it with the second, exhaust valve open method, as it means we don't have to lift the car up, remove the wheel arch liner, set to TDC, etc. This way is just quicker. Now I'll put the sequence up on the screen now for each valve that will be open and then each valve that we'll be adjusting while that particular exhaust valve is open. But basically we just rotate the engine, set each cylinder's exhaust valve to be fully open one at a time, and then adjust one cylinder's inlet valve and another one's exhaust valves. So I'm going to be aiming for the middle of the spec, which, since there's no groove in the camshaft, is 0.1 to 0.17 mil on the inlet and 0.2 to 0.27 mil on the exhaust. So what you want is, when you pass your feeler gauge through, is a drag on it, what's described as a firm sliding fit. Now the dilemma that you usually have is that smack in the middle of the values doesn't usually leave you anywhere near an actual feeler gauge size. So I'm going to be using three sizes. Smallest one I want set at the bare minimum value, or preferably slightly above it. So for example, on inlet 0.1 to 0.17 mil, that's going to be 0.1 mil. And with that one, I'm just going to be looking for an ever so slight drag. Nothing more, just enough to know that it's actually catching. Then the middle size, I want hopefully as close as possible to the middle of the spec, which is 0.135. So I'll have to go with 0.15. And what I want this to do is be a really tight fit under there. So hopefully that gets us somewhere in the middle of these two, because that's going to be tighter than what's described as a firm sliding fit. So if we've got a nice drag on this one, and then very, very tight on the 0.15, hopefully we're between the two. Now, with the last one, I want that as close as possible to the maximum, which is 0.17 in this case. So I'm going to have to go with 0.2. And obviously, I do not want that to pass under at all. And also, before you get started, you might want to draw yourself a little picture or something just to keep track of the valves you've set so that you don't lose track. And bear in mind that on these Renault engines, cylinder number 1 is at the flywheel end of the engine, and of course your exhaust valves are at the back and your inlet valves are at the front. And also remember that each rocker is operating two valves, each of which has an individual adjustment. Now before you start, if you've plugged the intake ports with anything like I have here, make sure you remove that before you start rotating the engine. I doubt that it would get sucked into the intake here, but better to be safe than sorry. Now, as I previously mentioned, there are two different camshafts potentially fitted to this engine, which have different clearances. One's got a groove in it and one hasn't. So the first thing we need to do is identify the camshaft that we have fitted to our engine. Now, this groove, if you have it, is located between the cam lobes on cylinder 2, remembering that cylinder 1 is on the flywheel end, so this is cylinder 2. You want to look between the two rocker arms here, and you should see a groove down in here. Now, it is not very easy to see, and I'm certainly not going to be able to show you it on this engine. We don't have one fitted down in here. The best thing to do is try and shine a torch down in here and see if you can see it between the cam lobes. So the cam lobes are going to be directly beneath the rocker arms here and here. So you're going between the two rocker arms here. Look down in there, and there should be a groove in there or not. If you really, really can't see, get a plastic something or other and try and have a feel down in there. If there is a groove, you should pick it up like you would do with your fingernail if you were feeling for something. Now we need to set the engine to our first position for adjustment, which is exhaust valves on cylinder 1 fully open. So the spring is going to be completely compressed. So we need to turn the engine over using the crankshaft pulley bolt down here, which is a 19 mil. Now there's plenty of room to get down here. Most manuals are going to suggest you remove the spark plugs if you find it difficult to rotate the engine. However, I've never found this to be necessary. I mean, you can turn this thing over easily with a normal 3/8 ratchet. If you do struggle, then check you haven't left it in gear. However, the crankshaft pulley bolt is not an easy one to keep your ratchet on, so I prefer to use the alternator. Is this the right way? No, but it's so much easier. If you decide to do it this way and your alternator belt is slipping, then I've got a video for that. So either 19mm on the crankshaft pulley bolt, or it's a 24mm for the alternator nut, and we're going to be turning righty-tighty to rotate the engine clockwise. So what we'll be doing is turning the engine until the exhaust valves on cylinder 1 are fully open. So the valve springs will be fully compressed and the valve will be fully down. Another thing you can do is actually watch for the peak of the cam lobe coming up to push up on the rocker arm. So we just head around, turning the engine clockwise until number 1 cylinder exhaust valves are fully open. So that rocker arm will be fully down. Just watch both the valve springs, and try and keep an eye out for that cam lobe as it starts to come up and around. You might find you start off a long way away from the first part of the sequence, but they're all in order after that, so it gets a lot quicker. Here we go, it's starting to go down now. And just go slowly as they're compressing. And as soon as they stop, that's it. So as you saw what I just did there, as you're starting to compress these valve springs, you just slow down as you're heading down to the end of the stroke, just so you can be sure that you don't overshoot. If you do, and this starts to rise again, just head all the way back around, and then as you come in just to the bottom of the stroke, just really slow down with the ratchet, just very small movements, and then what you'll see is this will just come to a sort of dwell, and that will be when this cam lobe's at the very peak, and that's when you want to be adjusting, when this is fully compressed. Okay, so following our sequence, we're going to be checking the clearances on cylinder 3's inlet and cylinder 4's exhaust. Just check that they're definitely rocking, which they are. So cylinder 3 inlet valves first. Get your feeler gauges set up for the inlet clearances on your engine. So for this one, it's 0.1mm to 0.17mm. So as I explained earlier, in order to try and hit the middle of that spec, I'll be using the 3 feeler gauges. So I'll try 0.1 first, and just rock the rocker arm left and right, just so you can see where you want to be going. It'll be obvious because you'll see it moving, the part of the rocker arm, and then you'll see that the valve doesn't. So you want to get in that gap there. There's only going to be one place for a gap, but this makes it obvious where you ought to be going. So our 0.1 is sliding fairly freely, but if you can just, I don't know if you'll be able to hear this. You can hear there's a slight drag on there. And on the other inlet valve as well, because of course there are 2 per rocker arm. There's a fairly good drag on there too, so that must be close to 0.1, and of course we want to go between 0.1 and 0.17, but better to be in the middle rather than tight or too loose. Now I'll try the 0.15, which is closer to the middle of the spec, where we actually want to be. And that is a real tight fit. It will pass through, but that is a snug fit. I have to push that through. Let's check the other one as well. Again, a very tight fit, and I think it will just pass through. So that is actually, yeah, bang on where I would like it to be, this one. So no need for adjustment on this one. So I'm more or less certain that there's no chance that the top end of the spec is going to pass under here, but I will just check. So that's 0.2, which is close to 0.17 as we can get, but I don't want this to get under here at all. And it will not go through. Right, so with inlet 3's checked, now we move on to exhaust number 4. Now don't forget to change your feeler gauges over, because the clearances are different on all the engines between the inlet valves and the exhaust valve clearances. So for this engine, that's 0.2 to 0.27 millimeter. And again, as I said earlier, I'm doing it with 3 feeler gauges. So I'll start with the 0.2. Which passes under nicely, but has got a firm sliding fit, which is exactly what you want if you've got the right spec. If you're bang in the middle, if you're lucky enough to have a feeler gauge set that will land you right in the middle, you want a firm sliding fit. So just a slight drag, you want it to drag on the feeler gauge. You don't want it to be really pinching it off, but you do want it to be dragging on it. But I'm doing this 3 feeler gauge method because I can't land in the middle and I want to be as close as possible. So 0.2's got a nice drag on it. Let's just check that 0.25 can't fit under or is very tight. Now 0.25, see, this is where you can get tripped up, because 0.25 is again a nice, what I'd describe as a firm sliding fit. Quite a bit tighter on this one, closer to the cam belt end. But quite a bit looser on that one. And then we'll just see whether we can get 0.3 under, which is way above spec for this one. I don't want that to go under at all. But if I give it enough persuasion, I can just pass it through. Not on this left one, on that right one, I can pass it through. So we'll adjust this one. Right, so I'm going to adjust this one here on the right, on the exhaust side. I'm just looking for that to be a bit tighter on the, akin to this one on the left here, a bit tighter on that 0.25, because that is sort of at the top end of the spec. And it's just not quite tight enough for me on there. And then the 0.2 at the bottom end of the spec is very loose through this one. And then quite a bit tighter on that one. So in order to adjust, we need a 10mm on this lock nut to slacken it off, and then a flat blade screwdriver to adjust the adjusting screw. Now, just bearing in mind, you're only really going to be doing this a smidge. Think of the thread pitch on these adjusting screws, and then realize that you do not want to go very far at all in order to adjust that tiny, tiny increment. So we'll just go down a tiny bit, just a pinch, and now already that feeler gauge now does not move in there. However, I suspect when we pinch it up, the nut, trying to keep the adjustment screw in the exact same position, it'll probably ease off. Now there is a torque for these adjustment screws, which is 10 Nm, but just a pinch with the spanner is going to do for me. And then we'll see how that feeler gauge is passing through there now. Yeah, see, now that is very tight through there. So even that tiny adjustment, that's too much. A little bit back. That's a lot better. That's nice and tight now. Just pinch up that nut. And then have another check just to be sure that you're happy with now where you've now set it. That's good. And just make sure, of course, that the minimum of your spec, so 0.2 in this case, still passes under there. Again, that's got a nice drag, not as tight as the 0.25, but still good. Okay, now with 3 and 4 checked and adjusted, rotate the engine again until exhaust valve number 3 is fully open. So we're bringing the exhaust valves on cylinder number 3 to fully open, so the springs will be fully compressed. This will be a lot quicker coming round this time, because this is the sequence. So there we go, it's descending now already. Make sure you keep your eye on it. Try and watch both the cam lobe and the springs as well. Really slow down. Just wait for that movement to stop, that downwards movement. That's it. So the inlet valves to adjust with this one is cylinder number 4, and the exhaust valves is cylinder number 2. So again, just check that they're rocking, which they are. Set your feeler gauges again to your inlet valve clearances. I'll start with 0.1 under here. And that is, let's tuck these other 2 away. It's got a slight drag, but it's definitely not tight. Step up to 0.5. Remember, we're going 0.1 to 0.17. And that is very difficult at 0.5 to pass underneath. Almost impossible again. It's shaping up to be at the moment that the inlet valves, or by and large all the valve clearances, are actually quite good. Certainly the inlet valve so far. Yes, that's just barely able to pass through. Let's just check the top, well, beyond the spec, but I'm happy with that at 0.5 dragging like that. That's not how, yeah, we're not going to get 0.2 through. No. So again, the inlet valves are in no need of adjustment here. I'm happy with that, with the 0.1 still dragging slightly, and then the 0.15 very difficult to pass through, almost impossible. I'm happy that those are well in spec. Okay, exhaust valves on cylinder 2. Let's check our minimum, which is 0.2 on this. I do apologise if the camera can't see too well on the exhaust side ones. This is not easy. The engine's at quite a bit of an angle, so there isn't an easy way. Now that sliding, I mean, there's definitely a drag there. I think the 0.25 is probably going to be dragging hard. So I think these probably will not need adjustment. Let's try and get the 0.25 under there. Yeah, see, this is about the same sort of resistance that I got when I did adjust that one there. That's a nice, very tight fit. It has to really be pulled back out again. Same with that one. So again, these are not in need of adjustment. I will just check the 0.3, that we absolutely cannot get that under there. Make sure they're not out of spec that way. Nope. Nope. Right, rotate again and open up fully exhaust valves on number 4, compress those. Right, so bring in the engine around until the rocker arm on number 4, cylinder number 4. So all the way down, compressing those valve springs. Again, it will be the next one in line, so be ready for it because it'll be quick. As it starts to drop, just small ratchet strokes. Keep your eyes on those valve springs. There it is. Okay, with the exhaust valves on cylinder number 4 all the way down, it's the inlets on number 2 and the exhaust on number 1. Just check that those rocker arms are free. And then with the inlet valve clearances in mind, so I'll start with a 0.1. Oh, that's a very loose fit under there. Let's try the 0.15. Get this 0.1 out of the way. Bear in mind the spec is 0.1 to 0.17. Yeah, that's a lot looser than the others have been up to this point. Oh, very much looser on that one. Let's just try the 0.2. I don't think it will go under, but they would have to be way out, well, out, very loose in order for that. No. I mean, it'll start like it will on all the others. I'm guessing that these have kind of a rounded head on them, these adjustment screws. So you can get part of the way in, but then it stops you completely. Even if you lift up on the rocker arm, there's no chance you'll get in like that. However, I am going to adjust these two as well, so I'm quite a bit tighter on that 0.15, because that is passing through way too loose for my liking there. Especially since the middle of the spec is going to be 0.13. Okay, so I'm actually quite glad that one of the inlet valves is going to be out, because it'll be a lot easier for you to see the adjustment this way. Couldn't really make it out very well, I'm sure, on the adjustment on the exhaust valves on number 4, because they're a lot harder to see. But basically, that's way too going through there. Maybe not so much quite on that one, but on this one, that's passing through way too easily. So I'm gonna have to pinch that up a little bit. Slacken off the adjustment nut with our 10mm. Try and keep it in the same place actually as well. And then very, very small adjustments, because the thread pitch on these adjusting screws is actually quite a bit coarser than I would have expected it to be. I'd think it'd be a bit finer, so you could get a more delicate adjustment. Now that's a very... Oh no, now it's not. It's got a bit more drag to it now. Not quite enough for the 0.15 in my opinion. It's just a smidge more. That's just a little bit too much. Very, very, very fine. Well, it's not fine adjustment, that's the problem. You've got to be very fine, because the threads are coarse. Gotta say, these are definitely a bit more fiddly on the inlet than on the exhaust. It's probably not even perceivable on the camera how little I'm moving that screw. That's better. Actually gone a tiny bit too slack there. So just a smidge. But you'll feel when the nut gives, unfortunately, the screw inevitably moves just a tiny bit. There we go. That's a lot tighter now. Just a smidge more. Ah, there we go. That's what I wanted. Just quite a fair amount of resistance to that. Finally got there in the end. Let's just check that nut's pinched. That one took quite a bit of time, but the key is just patience. Yeah, that's what we want. A real good bit of resistance to that there. And we'll just double check the 0.2, although we've made it tighter, not looser, so I very much doubt. We'll see how the 1 feels. Now, definitely more drag on that. And then the 0.2. Can't go under. Adjust this one now. So again, that's quite a loose fit under there. See if we can get this one done a bit quicker. There we go, that's what I wanted. Again, a really tight fit on that 1.5, and then hopefully quite a bit more drag on the 0.1. Yep. Okay, exhaust valves on cylinder 1. Next, 0.2 to 0.27 on this engine. So I'll start with the 0.25, excuse me, gauge. Let's see. Well, that passes under quite well, quite loose. In fact, same again on the other one, a bit more resistance on the other one for sure. Let's just try the 0.3, because if that passes under, then we know. Another thing to just point out, make sure the gauges are actually on their own. You don't want another one hidden underneath there. Again, speaking from experience. So the 0.3 Don't know how well you can make that out, but the 0.3 has passed under that one. So that's in definite need of adjustment. And the other one as well. It's not easy to get it under there, but it certainly shouldn't be able to go under at all, because 0.27 is the top end of the spec for these. So we'll be adjusting these. Okay, so I'll start with this one on the right. Just crack that off. Now that's a tight fit in there now. I've done that down against the feeler gauge, and then I'm going to pinch up the nut, which we know brings it back up again a smidge, and we'll just see how that's left it. That's a lot better now. Make sure to take all the pressure off the screwdriver so you're not pushing down and taking up that plate yourself. Just a tiny, tiny bit more. Let's see how that is. That's a good tight fit on there. Let's try the 0.2. Again, we've got some drag, and the 0.25 is real tight through there. We'll just check the 0.3, make sure that can no longer fit under. Nope, good. That's that one done. Onto the one on the left. See how that one was. Now that's quite a bit tighter on there. That's good. It's just pinched up. Check it doesn't move too much, because that did need quite a bit of a pinch there. I expect that might have... No, that's still good. Nice and tight on there. Yeah, that's nice and tight. How's that feeling through there? Yeah, that's good. Let's check the 0.3. I know there's no chance that the 0.2, sorry. I know there's no chance the 0.3 will fit under. Let's just check the 0.2. Still nice. Clearance, yep, and a nice little drag there. Perfect. Right, last one to fully open now. Number 2 exhaust valve. And we're on our way down. Can see that cam lobe coming up now. Still on the way down. Still on the way down. That's it, stop there. Okay, and this time we're checking the inlet valves on number 1 and the exhaust valves on cylinder number 3. Okay, I'll try that 0.15 on the inlet valves. That won't even go under on these ones. Let's try the, check it's rocking, which it is, and on number 3, yep. Oh well, 0.1. It's going under there nice and easy. Slight drag on there though. A bit more of a drag than on some of the others, so I'm going to say that's probably nice and well set as it is. Just see if I can persuade it under there, but that's a very tight fit, as we are already, very tight. Yep, I'm happy with those, no need for adjustment there. Okay, moving on to the exhaust on cylinder number 3. Let's try our 2.5 first. That's quite a tight fit as it is. Apologies if I get in your way with the camera. Let's see if we can get the 0.3 in there. And unfortunately, we can get the 0.3 in there, and that moves. It's not easy, but the fact that it goes in at all just shows us that this is out of spec. Let's try it on the other one. Yeah, and it's the same on the other one. We can get that in there. So we're going to have to adjust these as well. So again, I'm going to be going for, I want our 0.25 to be a very tight fit in here, and I want the 0.2 to be dragging a hell of a lot more than that, what it is currently, and I want the 0.3 to not go under at all, obviously. Now what I will do is try and get that 0.25 under there now, and it won't go under. Let it under there. I want that to be a very, very tight fit. Such as is like that. Now when we do the nut down, typically that's been increasing the gap. Let's just see what we're at now. That's a very, very tight fit now, which is good. That's where I want it. Pinch that up, make sure that's good and tight. Let's check it again. Yeah, that's a very tight fit now. Oh, something to fetch. What did we used to do in the days before magnetic pickup tools, eh? Right, let's just see how that 0.2 feels in there now. There's a lot more resistance to that now. And the 0.25, of course, it's got a really heavy drag, and now the 0.3 will not go under. Perfect. Do the other one next to it, because that was slightly out too. So we know it's already out. So what I'm going to do, put the 0.25 under, have that set ready. Try that, pinch that up. Just till it catches the pinch, and let's see. Yeah, see, when you do the nut up, you're going to ease off somewhat every time. So you want it to be, I'm basically clamping down on that feeler gauge that's in there. With the adjustment screw. Not happy with that. Need just a bit more. Ah, that's much better. That's a really strong fit there. Let's tighten that down. Make sure that's pinched up. Let's check it now. I want that 0.25 to be really tight in there, which it is now. And check that that 0.3 can't get under. And then check the 0.2's just got a slight drag on it. Yeah, 0.3 can't go under now, as it could before. And the 0.2's got a nice drag. Perfect. Okay, so with all that done, the valve clearances are set now, and you can refer back to my rocker cover refit video to put everything back together. I'll put a card up on the screen for that now. Now I know what you're all thinking. Has that valve clearance adjustment made any difference at all to the engine noise? Well, here's how it sounded before. And now after. So I really don't think that's made any difference at all, but then again, there weren't really that many that were out of spec, and those that weren't very far out of spec at all. Anyway, that's this job done. So if you've enjoyed this video or it's helped you out at all, please hit the like button. If you'd like to see more videos from the channel in the future, then don't forget to subscribe, and you can find me over on Instagram @Sockets and Sideburns. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next video.